What's going on, everybody? It's Mitesh here and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a photographer and I like to share insight into my photography business. So you'll see things like behind the scenes, editing workflow, and generally how I run a photography business. So if you'd like to see more of that, then definitely keep in touch and stay tuned. So today I'm going to be showing you how I edit a real campaign shot from start to finish and the softwares that I use to do that. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. Right, so I've got my image loaded into Lightroom here. So this is a photo of a product that I shot recently, which is basically creatine gummies in a can. This is the actual gummy, what it looks like. So what I've tried to do here is I've tried to make the product float mid-air by using these acrylic rods here, one for the can and also one for the gummy as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean a little bit of the image up in terms of getting rid of these rods. So we're just going to move this image into Photoshop, which I've already got it loaded up here, and we're just going to create two new layers. I just tend to create two because one's for safety, and I just make that one disappear and I just work off that one there. It's just a background copy that I've made. So first things first, I always recommend that you get the shot as perfect as you can off camera. And that means if you need to take multiple shots to make your editing process a bit more seamless, then by all means you should be doing that. So what I mean by that is actually, instead of me getting rid of these two rods separately, what I did was I took an image of the can separately without the gummy, and I'm just going to place that on top here. Just going to wait for that to load in. There we go. We're not changing anything to this image that we're going to add as a layer, so I'm just going to click OK. It's just preparing that as a smart object, so that should place it on top now. Here we go. So obviously we need to align the image perfectly to the one underneath it, and I'll show you what I'm about to do really with this one. So if I press enter, that's placed the image on top now. So if I take that one off, you can see the one underneath and then the one I've just placed on top as a new layer. Now I do need to get it aligned as perfectly as I can. So what I'm going to do is, if you look at this little symbol here, we just need to rasterize the layer, so that gets rid of that. And if I select both layers and click on Edit, Auto Align Layers, and just press OK on Auto, and that should align the product from the top layer and the bottom layer as accurate as possible. Sometimes it can not align properly, but we can work with it. So I'm just going to trust that it has done that. And then what I'm going to do is the top layer here. So if you imagine one layer and then another layer of the image, we want to mask that image so that we can basically brush away the details that we don't need. So if I just click on the mask button here, and it's created a mask now, but I want to see the layer underneath it. So I'm just going to press, this is on a Mac by the way, I'm going to press Command and I, which then inverts it. So if you can see that, that's now showing the layer underneath it. Now, because that's inverted, obviously we can see that that's black. So we need to have the opposite color here, which is white. And I'm just going to use the brush and just make that bigger and just zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to set my flow to 100 because I want to get rid of the rod completely here. I'm not trying to fade it in or anything. So if I just do that, and you can see now what it's doing is just revealing the image underneath. So you can see what I mean by, if you get your shots perfect off camera, then that really goes in your favor. when you're editing, because you don't have to spend extra time doing this. So that's looking pretty good, and then we're just gonna zoom out a bit here. And just do it to the rest of the rod. That's doing it beautifully. Because remember, if you take more than one image for you to edit in, the exposure has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, you're going to get maybe a darker background or a lighter background come through. So that's really important. So if you zoom out now, if you take a look at that, that looks pretty good, right? So see, the whole gummy is basically just floating right next to the can. I think that looks pretty great. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to duplicate my layer so that I can work off a brand new layer now. And the next thing we're going to do is get rid of this rod. So this one's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to rename the layer rod removal. Zoom in a bit. Now there's multiple ways that you can do this just using Photoshop tools. So the first way that I always try is if you just click on this little lasso thing here, and just click onto polygonal lasso tool, and what we're going to do is we're just going to select the rod, and when you go around it, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it will just start highlighting it, so you can see the marching ants, I think they call it. Right, so click on edit. And the first thing that I always do is try content aware fill. And what this does is that it basically just scans your image and tries to fill the area with the details of the information that you already have on the image. So this isn't AI or anything, not yet anyway. We might use that later. Let's have a look. So that's done a great job there. Look, see, so it's just completely removed it. That's brilliant. So if you tick OK, because I'm happy with that. Now, sometimes there can be some imperfections with this, so the only thing that you can do is just fix it afterwards. It does sometimes do a horrible job of it as well, so that's not always the best tool to use, but in this case it's worked really, really nicely. Right, so if we just click away, there we go. Now, as you can probably tell, that doesn't look great on the edge of the can there. So you see, it's got a little piece of the rod. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to work with my tools and I'm just going to perfect it. So I'm just going to rename this can correction. I'm not trying to sound clever. And let's use the healing brush. So this is a healing brush. This is again, it uses the same sort of function as the content aware, and what I'm doing is I'm pressing option and it lets me choose an area of the image. So I want to choose the edge of this can because that looks more perfect, and I'm just going to move it down here and I'm going to brush along it like so. See, it's already looking more better. I'll brush that as well. There we go. And then the smaller you want to get on the detail, you got to make the brush smaller because then you can't work with it. So again, I'm going to take that bit there. And that looks brilliant. And then just brush over that little imperfection over there. Right, so that's fixed. We're going to just, in the end, we're just going to do a little touch up and just scan the image and make sure that everything does look perfect. I'm just zooming a bit too high there. Right, let's have a look. Okay, so we're going to try to do the same thing here because there's a slight dent in this can. There we go. Sometimes you don't have to make it so perfect because you can always fix it with these basic tools. So what I've done there is just selected the spot removal, and if I just click there once, you see it's already making it the way I want it. Now there's a little peak there, and I am sort of a perfectionist when it comes to stuff like this. Like it annoys me if there's something that's not right. So I'm just going to use the clone tool and select an area here on the white background, and I'm just going to brush around the edge here, and that's looking more better. And then if we scan the image over here, there's not really much apart from these little dust particles and stuff that we need to clean. So all we're going to do now is we're going to go back onto the spot removal. We're going to start from the top, and anywhere you see any dust, anything like that, we're just going to remove it by clicking it like so. This is fairly easy. There's other ways to do this as well. You know, if you know, the product that you shoot is just horrid, full of scratches, dents and things like that, there's obviously a lot more cleaner ways to do this, but right now I'm just going with the basic approach, so it doesn't take me too long with this. So I have a thing for making these kind of images just look as immaculate as I can, and you know, along the way there's things that I always learn with Photoshop and new tools and things like that, which just make the editing process a bit more seamless and make my image looking better. So remember, this is all a learning process, because you know, when I first started Photoshop, I only knew about basic tools and things like that, but the more you sort of experiment with your image and your editing and learn from other creators, you know, what these tools exactly do, then it only makes your work a bit more better, which is the goal, right? You know, you want to make your work as best as you can. So that's looking really nice. So there's a little dent, a shadow thing here, which I'm going to fix in a moment, but so far I think it's looking pretty good. There wasn't much to do here for cleanup, because during my shoot I tend to do a good cleanup of the product using like an air blower to like remove any dust and things like that. So it just makes my editing a whole lot easier, which is pretty much what I mentioned before. So try get it perfect on camera as much as you can, and then you don't have to spend hours and hours editing your image. So that's looking pretty great now. We're almost finished on Photoshop. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the healing brush, and I want to fix this little dent that's got a deeper shadow on it. So I'm just going to select the area on top, and I'm going to brush over it like so, and it's gone. Right, and we also need to fix, where was it? There we go. Yeah, so it's just a highlight. I don't know if you can tell, but the highlight seems to be falling off this way. So I'm going to use the healing brush again, and I'm just going to copy and paste the highlight coming down here, because you know, it looks unnatural if the highlight's falling off. There must have been a small curvature in the actual can. Right, there we go. And then finally, I think this is the last bit, which is just a little bit of cleanup here in the bottom of the can. Right, there we go. Now, you know, you can get closer and closer to the product, and just start doing everything, and you've got to bear in mind that there's got to be a line, you know, because for whatever the images are going to be used for, you're not going to see micro details, you know. I always just visually just look at my image and try correct it as best as I can. I think that approach has worked for me. So check it out. That is looking amazing, I want to say. Okay, so we're going to save that. And we're just going to wait for that to load up to 100%, and then that should import it back into Lightroom for me, because I exported it to Photoshop from Lightroom. Right, there we go. So you can probably tell the first thing that we need to fix is this white line that's coming around here, around the frame. So if we just zoom into the product a little bit, I think we need to rotate it slightly because it's not centered, is it? There we go. Right, just a bit more that side. Center. Right, that's looking pretty good. So we're going to start off with the temperature, and like I said, I just want this a bit more on the warmer side. Too warm. I think that looks okay. And the first thing that I will always do, everyone edits differently, but the first thing that I dive into is the tone curve, because I like to fully control my shadows and highlights before I go into anything else. So that works for me because I don't like controlling the exposure here and then tweaking it into tone curve. Maybe that's just the way I do it, but I guess, you know, like I said, everyone has their own way. So there's 3 points here on the tone curve. You know, you've got your blacks and your shadows leading up to your highlights and your whites. So the highlights, we're gonna just put a point there, and we're gonna pump up the highlights right about there. And generally what you want is, you know, they say that if you have a nice little S-curve, then that usually performs really well on your image in terms of a good balance between your highlights and your shadows. But it's not always the case. There's other ways to do it as well, but generally speaking, an S-curve works really well. So I'm pumping up the highlights there, and then I'm not going to deepen the shadows too much, so I'm just going to create a point there so I can control that. And then I want to lift up my blacks, so like so. And then what I tend to do is, there's already some deep shadows on this side of the image, so I'm just going to slightly deepen it a little bit more, and that's enough for me. That's perfect. So look, we've only done 2 bits there, and that's looking, it's pretty much looking ready, I think, wouldn't you say? Now we can go into the actual tone and just tweak it slightly. So I'm going to lift the blacks up slightly, and this is all just preference at the end of the day, but you know, we do need to align it to the client's needs as well, so we do got to bear that in mind. Whites a little bit, shadows. I do like my shadows a bit more deeper. It just gives that little sort of mysterious look, especially like an editorial style lookbook, which is great. I love that. The clarity, just pump it down a little bit to about 10. There we go. Now the color mixer, there's not many colors in this really, and to be fair, the saturation is looking pretty good. The only thing that I am going to do is just reduce the blues and the aquas, because you can sometimes see the vignetting on the frame, and it's usually in like a cooler tone. So I've just reduced that down. I'm just gonna, just to double check, is pinpoint the actual color, and look, there's a bit of magenta in there as well, so I'm going to reduce that all the way down. That's looking epic. Right, the next bit is your color grading. So you've got your shadows, midtones, highlights, and obviously your global tone there as well. So I always start with the highlights, and you can just play around with this, to be fair, to find what tone fits well with the actual product, because you know, you still got to have that contrast, because you know, that's what creates a striking image at the end. So if I just increase the hues to about 60, I think about 67, and maybe just go with about 10. I think that's all. I think that's perfect. That's it's working really well, actually. I'm not really going to add anything else. I'm not going to add anything into the shadows or anything, because you know, I think the warmer look is going really well with the gummy here, because the gummy is creating that contrast with the actual product. So apart from that, you know, you can play around with the tools like your grain, your details, your vignetting, and things like that. But if you don't need to touch it, then you don't need to touch it. I'm not a huge fan of images that are over edited. I do like my images being polished nicely with a slight style, and you know, I'd say like, I am really a huge fan of like the editorial look. It's sort of like a storytelling lookbook. That's definitely like a vibe that I do dig. Right, so I think that's pretty much finished. So what do you guys think? You know, we only used Photoshop and Lightroom to create our image, but you can see where we started, which was the image with the rod, which is right here. And what a difference. I mean, what a difference. That looks epic. From that to our final image, I think that's a huge difference in how we've elevated that shot. If we click on the before, and that just shows us our exposure control and our color grading that we've applied. See that side by side as well. And there you have it, as easy as that. Right, so that is it from me today. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you do like to see more of editing or any behind the scenes, or just generally what I get up to as a photographer, then please do drop me a comment. Give this video a thumbs up if you did gain any value from it. And I am actually looking to revamp a few bits in my studio space. So do stay tuned for that, and if you do like to see more, then just click that subscribe button. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.